Hello everyone, welcome to Sinister Prime. Since many of you listen to these stories to relax and drift off into dreams, I thought it would be wonderful to hear where you're tuning in from around the world. Let's begin the story. I work at a 24-hour gas station off a rural highway. It's one of those stations that barely gets any traffic, especially during the night shift. This place is a ghost town after 10 p.m., with only a few lonely truckers pulling in to fill up or grab a coffee. Most of the time, I'm alone, surrounded by the dull hum of fluorescent lights, the faint scent of motor oil, and the whine of an old radio that never quite tunes in right. It was a Thursday night when things took a turn. The night felt off from the start, like the air was too thick, heavy, as if it was pushing down on me. The station was particularly dead that evening, even for this place. No truckers, no late-night wanderers, just the oppressive quiet of the country night. I was about halfway through my shift, around 2 a.m., when I first noticed it, a figure standing by pump 3. At first I thought it was a shadow, maybe some weird reflection off the lights. But when I blinked and looked again, it was still there. A man, tall, motionless, just standing there. He wasn't pumping gas. Hell, he didn't even have a car. I squinted, trying to make out his face through the hazy glass of the station window. But it was too dark. All I could see was his outline. He had long arms, too long for his body, almost like they dragged slightly below his knees. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light, some optical illusion. But when he didn't move for what felt like 5 minutes, I knew something was wrong. I grabbed the radio behind the counter and spoke into the static-filled receiver. "You need some help out there, man?" I reached under the counter and grabbed the aluminum baseball bat I kept for protection. It wasn't much, but it made me feel better. I stepped out of the sliding doors, and the moment the cold air hit me, I realized how quiet the night really was. No wind, no crickets, nothing. "Hey," I called out, moving toward him. "You all right, buddy?" He turned his head, just his head. His body stayed still as stone, but his neck craned toward me, too far, like it might snap. And that's when I saw his face, pale, gaunt, skin stretched tight over his bones, and his eyes were empty. Not in the figurative sense, they were literally empty. Just 2 black holes where his eyes should have been. I froze. Every instinct I had screamed at me to get back inside. But I couldn't move. My legs were locked in place, heart thudding in my chest. His mouth opened, and a raspy voice leaked out, like he hadn't spoken in years. "You shouldn't be here." I snapped out of it and stumbled back a few steps, nearly tripping over my own feet. What the hell are you talking about?" I managed to stammer. "You shouldn't be here," he repeated, his voice growing more distorted, almost like there was another layer to it, something deeper, darker. I turned and ran back inside, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands were shaking so badly that I couldn't grip the handle right. I grabbed my phone from the counter and dialed the cops. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before someone picked up. But it wasn't the usual operator. "You shouldn't be here," the same raspy voice whispered into my ear. I threw the phone down in horror, the receiver clattering against the counter. What the hell was going on? My breath was coming in short gasps, panic clawing at my throat. I glanced back toward pump 3. The man was gone. The gas station was surrounded by thick woods on all sides, except for the highway. There was nowhere for him to go unless he sprinted into the trees, but he hadn't. I would have heard him move. I sat behind the counter, gripping the bat tight in my hands, waiting for something to happen. Minutes passed, then an hour. The clock ticked past 3 a.m., and everything was silent again. Maybe it was some messed-up prank. Maybe it was a weird dream. I didn't know what to think, but eventually I convinced myself it was over. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me feeling drained. I needed to distract myself, to calm down. I pulled out my phone to scroll through mindless apps when I heard it. A scratching sound coming from the roof. I froze. It was soft at first, barely noticeable, but then it grew louder, more deliberate. Like something was dragging itself across the shingles. My mind raced. Maybe it was an animal? A raccoon? Yeah, a raccoon. But no animal made sounds like that. The scratching stopped, and for a few heartbeats the night was silent again. Then there was a loud bang, like something heavy had just hit the roof directly above me. I jumped up, bat in hand, eyes darting around the ceiling, expecting it to cave in at any second. Another bang, closer this time. "Who's there?" I shouted, feeling the ridiculousness of the question even as it left my lips. The lights flickered. For a brief moment, everything went dark, and in that instant, I felt a presence, something watching me from every corner of the room. My breath hitched as I fumbled for my phone again, using the flashlight to pierce the darkness. When the lights snapped back on, something caught my eye by the front door. The man from before was standing inside the station now, less than 10 feet away from me. His neck was twisted, grotesquely turned to one side, as if it had been broken. His empty eyes were fixed on me, and his mouth hung open, too wide, like his jaw had been dislocated. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered again. The same words, but this time they sounded closer, like they were being spoken from inside my head. I backed up slowly, heart hammering against my ribs, unable to tear my eyes away from him. I raised the bat in front of me, more for comfort than protection. "What do you want?" I screamed, desperate for some explanation. His body twitched, and then impossibly, his limbs began to contort and lengthen, his arms growing even longer, fingers stretching until they scraped the floor. His skin seemed to sag, like it was melting off his bones, and his jaw. God! His jaw unhinged with a sickening crack, opening wider and wider until it looked like it could swallow me whole. I bolted for the back door, my feet barely touching the ground as I sprinted through the storage room, knocking over shelves and boxes in my panic. I hit the door with full force, shoving it open and stumbling into the cold night air. I didn't stop running. I didn't look back. I just ran. My car was parked behind the station, and I could barely get the keys out of my pocket. My hands were trembling so bad. I fumbled with the lock before finally managing to get the door open. I threw myself inside, started the engine, and floored it out of there. The tires squealed as I tore out onto the highway, my heart pounding in my throat. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him running after me. But there was nothing, just the empty road stretching into the night. I didn't stop driving until I reached the next town, a small place called Dry Creek. There I pulled into a diner parking lot and sat in my car, trying to catch my breath, my mind racing with what had just happened. I couldn't go back. I didn't care if I lost my job, if I lost everything. I wasn't going back to that station. I checked my phone, my hand shaking as I unlocked it. I had missed calls from my boss, probably wondering why I wasn't at the station anymore. And then there was one missed call from an unknown number. I hesitated before playing the voicemail. The same raspy voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I dropped the phone like it had burned me, my heart skipping a beat. I looked around, scanning the dark, empty parking lot. There was no one. But the feeling That same oppressive feeling from before was back. The air felt thick again, like something was watching me, waiting. I turned the key in the ignition and sped off, not knowing where I was going, just knowing I had to keep moving. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours until the sun started to rise, the pale light filtering through the trees, finally bringing some warmth back into the world. It's been 3 days since that night, and I haven't been able to sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see him, his twisted neck, those hollow eyes, and that voice whispering over and over again in my head. You shouldn't be here. I don't know what I saw, what that thing was, but I know this. I'm never working another night shift again.